How can the economy be booming if so many feel left out? If you listen to financial news, economists, or even corporate leaders, you would largely hear that the economy is doing great. Unemployment is down, growth is steady, and corporate profits have reached record highs. But if you listen to nearly anyone else, you'll hear a different story. Because rent is rising, the median cost of a home is at an all-time high, groceries cost more, and wages don't seem to keep up. It's a paradox that's affecting nearly everyone, yet it feels like most of us are on our own. So today we'll dive into why the economy feels broken for 99% of us, even if the numbers say otherwise. Now, tackling this subject is complex and multifaceted, so I'm going to try to focus on a handful of selectful data points that economists typically refer to gauge how the economy is doing. But I think first, it's important to establish this context. When we aggregate a multitude of factors and come to a conclusion, it's important to keep in mind that in doing so, sometimes we oversimplify this complex system. But let's start with housing. Because as I said, the median cost of a home is at an all-time high, and right now in the US, it's somewhere between $420,000 and $440,000. Now, I'm providing this range due to recent fluctuations in these figures and because data like this is a lagging indicator. However, when we compare this data to the national median price of a home just 4 years prior in September of 2020, we can see that the cost has increased at around an annual rate of $25,000. Totaling the $100,000 difference we see in today's price. But in more populated areas like Boston, Los Angeles, New York City, and among others, we can see that the median price has increased by far more. And in other areas, it will of course be less than the roughly $430,000. However, it is important to note that cities with higher costs associated with homeownership or rent typically have the better job markets with the most economic opportunity. Now, with traditional home loans, you generally need to put down 20% of the home's price to secure a loan. Assuming the cost of a $430,000 home, the down payment would be $86,000. Of course, not every home loan requires 20% down, with other loans such as first-time home buyers, VA loans, and even on some traditional 30-year fixed loans. Depending on your credit and income, you may be able to negotiate your down payment to an amount lower than 20%. But according to data from the Federal Reserve, the average American below 44 years of age not only would not have enough for this 20% down payment, but wouldn't even be able to come up with a 10% down payment for a home that costs around that current median price. According to the Federal Reserve, while they don't specifically collect savings data on people who are 30 years old, they instead lump everyone together who is 35 and under. The numbers show a staggering figure. The average savings for that age group is only $20,540, and the median savings for that age group is only $5,400. Now, if we look at the age range between 35 and 44, the average savings for that group is $41,540, and the median savings is $7,500. So clearly not enough to afford the down payment for the median home price in the United States right now. Now, these figures on purchasing a home haven't even included interest rates yet, which is another huge barrier causing this housing crisis. Because currently the rate for a 30-year fixed mortgage is roughly 7.4%. Here's a graph to show you how much someone will pay over the course of 30 years with a home loan amount for $344,000. We take this figure because we assume someone who was able to find a home for the $430,000 median price was able to put 20% down, which would have been $86,000. And as you can see, by the end of the loan, assuming you don't make any additional payments to reduce the principal balance, you will have paid over $500,000 interest alone. Now, I'm no mathematician, but something here seems unattainable. How are Americans supposed to afford something so essential like a home? Well, there's always renting, right? Well, let's look at the data around that. According to Zillow, in November, the median rent price in the US was $2,042 a month. This is down $51 from October of this year, but up $23 from November of 2023. So even if home prices stabilize, which in some areas they certainly have, renting offers little relief to the housing crisis. This is also amplified largely due to the lack of supply of new and existing homes. America just doesn't have enough housing right now.
The real issue with housing is that we have had and are on track to continue to have not enough housing.
And here's another factor playing into the lack of affordability. In 2022, it's estimated that 84% of new single-family homes sold had an HOA. This is up from 66% only a decade earlier. While it's also true that on average, homes with an HOA can increase the value of a home by roughly 4%, It's equally important to note that these HOA fees can range in the hundreds of dollars each month. Now, I don't have time to fully go down the HOA rabbit hole, but maybe I'll save that for another video, because they are becoming increasingly more prevalent and most of the time add never-ending unnecessary costs to becoming a homeowner. But I would also be doing this topic a disservice if I didn't mention the role private equity and public corporations like BlackRock play in buying up residential real estate to use as investments, widening the gap for the first-time homebuyers or homeowners who need to upsize their home due to expanding their family. According to MetLife Investment Management, institutional investors may control 40% of US single-family rental homes by 2030. Okay, so the housing market's unaffordable. Well, the stock market's at an all-time high, right? Yeah, it is. The Dow Jones, NASDAQ, and S&P 500 are all trading at near or all-time highs. Well, here's a number for you. The top 1% of Americans own 50% of stocks, while the bottom 50% only own 1% of stocks. As of 2024, 62% of US adults own stocks, which is a 20-year high. But if we consider a breakdown among earners, it's 87% of upper income Americans owning stocks compared to 65% of middle class Americans owning stocks and only 25% of lower income individuals owning stock. So as wealth concentrates in a smaller portion of society, opportunities for wealth building, such as home ownership or stock market investments, remain out of reach for many. Now, this means younger people don't have the same access to assets that can appreciate over time. Now, arguably, the one thing affecting most Americans over the last 3 to 4 years has been inflation. Wherever we go, we are constantly inundated with the reality of these increased prices. Inflation reached its peak back in 2022 when it rose up to over 8% year over year. This prompted the Federal Reserve to raise interest rates in an attempt to try to slow down the economy.
While higher interest rates, slower growth, and softer labor market conditions will bring down inflation, they will also bring some pain to households and businesses. These are the unfortunate costs of reducing inflation.
At the same time, while rates were rising, they also wanted to avoid causing the US to drop into a recession, which so far it seems like they have avoided. Now, the Fed has a target goal for inflation of 2% annually, and currently, so far in 2024, the newest data shows inflation is at 2.6% for the year. However, that does not necessarily mean that prices have fallen. In fact, in most areas, it's been quite the opposite. Prices have slowed down at the rate in which they were increasing, but overall, they're still up 21.4% from 2020. And only 6% of the 400 items that the Bureau of Labor and Statistics track are cheaper today. I think the main concern for most Americans, even though this is not a problem that has been exclusive to the US, is widely speaking, prices are not going to go back down to how they were. Now, obviously, there are certain things like gas prices which fundamentally operate differently from something like food prices. And while yes, gas prices have declined from their highs in 2022, other essentials have not. And unless the US sinks into a depression, we are not going to see food and other prices decline back to the rates at which they were years ago. We're living in a pivotal time. Millennials and Gen Z face an uphill battle when it comes to getting ahead financially. Now, it's not exclusive to those two generations, but they will be feeling the most of this. And there's no doubt these challenges are immense. It's my hope, though, that these aren't insurmountable. Newer generations can push this economy to be inclusive and sustainable for the future ahead, with policies that address wage inequality, investments in housing, and the promotion of financial literacy. This isn't just about numbers, it's also about people. And while there's no overnight fix, every step toward greater equity and opportunity counts. One company in particular trying to disrupt this status quo by giving away bottled water for free really caught my attention. I covered the topic in this video here. Check it out next. Thanks for watching.